Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about 420C steel. You hear a lot about that. There's a couple of manufacturers that use that steel. Buck most famously uses 428C steel. And what exactly is that? Is it a good steel? Is it something you should watch out for? What are the characteristics of it? What it is good for, and what is it not good for? And so I do these as part of a series of knife steels so that you, the end user, can have more confidence in your knowledge of the steels that you're using, and also so you can make better choices when you go to purchase a knife. And you're looking at different steel options in those knives. So if you'd like to hear more about 420C steel, go ahead and check out the video. Hey, welcome back to the channel. And hi to all my viewers. Thanks, guys, for supporting the channel. Today, we're going to be talking about 420 steel, 420C specifically. And that's a designation of stainless steel. 420 is a category of steel. It falls in the class of steels in the 400 series. It is stainless and it has really good stainless properties. It's also a really strong steel. It's tough. When I talk about strong, we're talking about toughness. It scores very high in toughness. And so we're going to talk about the steel, its attributes, the good things about it, and maybe some of the bad things about it, and also maybe talk about it in relation to some other steel choices that you might have. And so that's what you can look forward in the video. I like to have props to help convey what I'm trying to convey to you, so it'll stick into your brain housing groups. But honestly, I have hundreds and hundreds of knives, and very few of those are marked 420. So, matter of fact, none of them that I could find had 420 on them, even though I know some of the knives have 420 steel in them. And that's one of the problems with 420 stainless steel. It has a bad reputation amongst knife users. It's known as a cheap steel. Some people think it's too soft. Some people think 420 is not as good as modern steels, and some think that they're just better steel options to use. And so manufacturers for a long time have hidden the choice of steel that they use because of that. All right, so up in the screen, you see a description of 420 stainless steel. It is a martinistic stainless steel. That simply means it's magnetic. And a lot of steel in and of itself is not very magnetic to begin with. But so stainless steel is a little more magnetic than, say, carbon steel. And so when you talk about being magnetic, it's not like copper. Copper is a fantastic conductor of electricity. And so it's just, more magnetic than some other steels. You also see in its description, it talks about 420C being a high carbon stainless steel. And so it is really not a high carbon stainless steel. And that's what's kind of funny. As you go around, it's really hard to find information on this steel. It's an old steel. It's used in certain industries, but it's not really tremendously popular. And so it's really hard to come up with good information on the steel. But if you look at this second description, it's right below the other description. And you'll see that it tends to look like a whole different thing. it's talking about the carbon content being 0.35%. That's really low. So over 5% is considered a high carbon steel. And a steel that has 6 carbon in it, say 6CR15 MOV, that would be a low high carbon steel. So high carbon is like 1095. That's 95% steel. And so that's a really high carbon steel. So, really lumping 420C into a high carbon category is not what these explanations mean. What they're talking about is it's higher carbon than 420A or 420B. That's really where those comments come from. They don't really mean that it's a high carbon steel, and it's not. And we'll talk about the characteristics of that. It has some really good advantages, by the way. So there's an inverse relationship between carbon and chromium. And so chromium tends to bond with carbon. So the more carbon that you have in a steel like 1095, it's going to absorb more of the chromium. And so that chromium isn't really free inside the steel to do its job, which is to prevent it from rusting and make the steel stainless. So that's why in really good stainless steels, the carbon content is low. And so when the carbon content is low and you have higher contents of chromium, then more of that chromium is inside the steel to prevent corrosion. And they tend to be really good at that. And 420 is really good at corrosion resistance. So where 420 is used in applications where you need that stainless ability. So surgical instruments. A lot of the steel that's called surgical steel is 420A or 420C, depending on what it's actually being used for, because of its excellent stainless qualities. Chances are the kitchen cutlery that you have in your drawer at home is 420, and same for your utensils, 420. 420C can be hardened sufficiently to use as bearings. It's used in bearings a lot. It's used in food processing. So when you see those shiny tankers that carry milk going down the highway, those are most likely 420 stainless steel that they use in that. Also in processing plants where food is produced. So that a lot of the equipment is made out of 420 stainless steel. And there's basically there's more than 3 variations, but for knife users, mostly we see the 3 variations: 420A, 420B, and 420C. So the basic difference between those steels is the carbon content in it. 420A has a 0.15% carbon content, extremely low carbon content. And so it's known as being a really soft steel. 420A is used a lot in diving knives because it doesn't have to be really strong. And stainless steel in and of itself, as I said, is a tough steel because of its carbon structure. And so the way that it crystallizes out creates a lot of strength in the steel. And so 420 HC has a toughness rating. If you look at this chart up here, this is a chart of stainless steels, their toughness, which is on this side. In the middle is a hardness rating, and over here is the corrosion rating. 420 HC is at the top of the list for toughness, and it is a very tough steel. That's why I think Buck also uses it in their knives. In a hunting knife, where you're going to be baton doing different things like that, that kind of toughness really comes in handy. But you can see the edge retention on it has a 2.5 rating. If you look over to the right, you see its corrosion resistance is 8. That's really high. So specialty steels get above that in that rating, but 8 rating for stainless application is really high. If you look at 420 14C28, that has almost the exact ratings of 420HC. It has a 9 in toughness. It's slightly better edge retention at 3, and it has a slightly better corrosion resistance. It's a better steel than 420, any of the 420 series. It's a better steel. If you look down a ways and find AEBL, that's a new steel that's produced. It has similar ratings to 420. It's at a 9 in toughness, a 3 in edge retention, and a 7 in corrosion resistance. So it's slightly lower. And probably the reason for that is it has a higher carbon content and more nickel in it. But if you look a little further down at M390, that's a metal particulate steel, space age steel. The toughness drops to 3.5, but the edge retention is 6.5, and the corrosion resistance is 9. And so you're seeing a lot of M390 or 20 CV and user knives, pocket knives, small camp knives, and things like that, because it has really good edge retention, and it is a really good stainless steel. It has very good stainless properties to it. It's not as tough or near as tough as 420HC. 420HC is 3 times tougher. If you look down to where N690, another popular stainless steel, relatively affordable steel, it's at 3.5 toughness, a 4.5 edge retention, and an 8 in stainless. So it's a good stainless steel. It has really good edge retention, but it's not as tough. And so there's always going to be a trade-off between toughness and edge retention. And as far as a steel goes, I don't think it's junk steel. I think it's an inexpensive steel, and that's why manufacturers use it, and also why they don't want to tell you that they're using it. You can get a working edge on them, no problem. Getting a really fine edge is hard to do on a 420 steel because the grain structure of the steel just doesn't lend itself to be that really fine razor edge sharp type of steel. There are lately new processes. So lately they've been adding nitrogen to 420 and 440 steel. This greatly increases the hardness of them, which will make the edge retention better. But they're expensive processes, and so you're just basically, if you're going to go through all that expense to make 420 or 440 harder, why don't you just get a harder steel like M390 or AEBL? So that's a whole different conversation. So the next chart here is the chemical composition chart. So there is, I think, 12 different alloys used in stainless steels, or in 420 in particular. Out of those, 4 or 5 of those are not commonly put into 420. It all depends on the results that you're looking for. So as with all steels, manufacturers can tailor a steel to particular needs, and that also affects the cost. One of the reasons that 420 is so popular is even though there's 12 alloys in there, the alloy contents are very, very low. And so even with the alloys put into the steel, not a lot is put into it. And so it's lower than other typical steels, and that's why it's less expensive. It's also why it's popular amongst knife manufacturers. This knife produced in China by Boker right here is not marked, and possibly could be 420 steel because it's not marked. Look at the designation of high carbon stainless steel. So that's something I would suspect you would put on something that was 420 C, high carbon um, stainless steel. Or, yeah, stainless steel. If it was HCR, they would just put it on there. Here's another example here. When you look at this, this is a stainless steel on this case knife right here, but it isn't marked with the type of steel that Case uses. Case, we know Case has already said for a long time it was a secret, but they use 420 C steel. They say it's 420HC. So what's the difference between 420HC and 420C? There really is no difference. So a few steel manufacturers will call their 420C steel 420HC because of the higher content in the steel, but it's not a high content steel. I already mentioned that to you. It's kind of confusing, but it's a way to kind of say I have a better steel. Now, the beauty of 420 stainless steel is you can harden it. It's whereas austenite stainless steel, you can't harden it. Martenite stainless steel, you can harden. And so in that hardening process, you can greatly increase the performance of that steel. And that's why Buck uses 420. It's inexpensive, and through their Boss heat treatment, they're actually raising the hardness of that steel to, you can raise 420C up to a hardness of 58 HRC. Normally 420 steel, they would say the HRC rating's around 50. And so that's, you can do that. And that is the beauty of 420 C stainless steel. But how many knife companies actually do that? And that's the question. And that's really been the problem with the steel for a long time. I grew up using 420 and 440 steel. That's what we had for stainless steel back in the 70s and the 80s. And it was hard to sharpen, and that's a major complaint with a lot of people, that it's hard to sharpen the steel. And the thing is, it's not really hard to sharpen the steel. It doesn't get to that razor edge. So that's going to lead into the next thing that we're going to talk about, and that has to do with the fact that the grain structure of that steel doesn't lend itself to have a razor edge sharpness. And so you will never get, with a lot of work, I think you can get a razor edge on stainless steel. It takes a lot of work to get a razor edge on it. You can get a good sharp haircutting edge on it with not too much problems. So that's the problem with 420, and the complaints that people make against it is because it's not designed for that razor edge type of application. So where do we go from here? In conclusion, 420 is going to be a really good stainless steel for you. It's never going to have that wicked edge that you want to put on your knife. So if you're that guy that has to have a razor knife edge, that's not going to happen with 420 steel. The 420 HC steels that Buck and Case use, that Gerber uses, you can get a pretty good edge on it. And it doesn't take a whole lot to do that. They're just not going to be the same edges that you can get with high carbon steels or steels that have really high contents of vanadium, nickel, and those type of contents in them. So I hope that answers some of your questions about 420. And it's kind of, I think, Case uses it because it's an inexpensive steel. I'd love to see Case go to 14C28. It's a better steel. It retains its edge longer, and you can get a finer edge with it. And I don't know that it's a whole lot more, but I guess the manufacturer feels differently. So thanks again for watching the video, and I really appreciate you guys.